Well, hey there. Welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. Bill Sherk, the man about the woods here, and I am hunkered down in my outpost in front of the wood stove that is cranking away. The walls are up around the property, and we are riding out this virus thing that is gripping all of us right now. That's the bad news. The good news is I still have phone service and computer service. So I've got the star of the show with me, Ron Schara. Ron, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Bill. I got to get out of the garage. I've been playing with my fishing tackle.
Is that what you're doing while you're confined to your home? You're going through?
Well, I had to do it sooner or later. So I got nothing much else to do except write a few things or whatever. But I spent several hours in the garage the last 3 days going over stuff. As I told you earlier, I took a messy bunch of tackle and rearranged them into a new mess. So that's about my skills for organization.
My advice is to get the hula poppers and the river runts out.
Wait, those are old good lures. They're all good.
So transparency, being locked home with the wife and boys, the boys have actually been carving their own baits the last few days. And you get one guess as to the two baits they've been trying to carve.
Well, the Rapala has to be one of them.
River runts and hula poppers.
Oh. Well, like I said, the river runts, one of the first lures that I remember. And then, of course, hula popper is still well-known lure. So there you go.
Yeah, and I can guarantee that the baits they're carving and painting up will float. Beyond that, time will tell. If we're allowed to get back on the water at some point.
While your boys are carving, let me add this. I went to Finland to do a story on Rapala, and you've been there as well. And one of the things they asked me to do, they had a little deal there that said, well, here, Lori Rapala carved the first Rapala lures. Here's some balsa. Here's see what you can do. And they had a bunch of us sitting around trying to carve our own Rapalas and add the tinfoil from the bubble gum or chewing gum and
candy wrapper. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I went along with it, but my Rapala, I don't think it would even catch hell. So there you go.
Yeah, it's amazing. That first Rapala bait, as I remember, was balsa on the inside. Like you said, foil wrapper from candy, and then for a coating on the outside, he used a film negative. Lori Rapala did. Yes. That he kind of melted down around the outside of that bait. Who knew?
Yeah, that's an amazing story.
Another amazing story, which is the whole reason I gave you a buzz today. Our greatest gifts to ourselves here in Minnesota. Something very near and dear to your heart. And that is our outdoor legacy amendment. I think people hear about it a lot. Back when it was being debated, I think it was big news. But, now that the amendment has passed and is implemented, I don't know that people necessarily think much about it these days, unless you're one of the folks trying to get the money, right?
Yeah. Well, that's very true. This was passed by voters in 2008, in the 2008 election. And so, we've got 12 years have gone by, and there's a lot of younger people now. You mentioned the Legacy Amendment, and they look at you like, what's that? And I said, well, you pay sales tax. Yeah. I said, well, some of this money now is going to preserving wetlands for you. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, sadly, that's true. But those things always happen, and that's one reason why Minnesota Bound, we did a special about it. We call it our greatest gift, and it's always a pleasure for me to talk about it because it really is a miracle for Minnesotans to do this. Minnesotans voted to tax themselves in 2008 during a mild recession, and to add sales tax that would be devoted to 4 different programs. 33% of the money would be going to the Clean Water Fund, 33% to the Outdoor Heritage Fund, which is Fish and Wildlife Habitat, and a little less than 20% to the arts, and around 14% to parks and trails. And what this amounts to is, what we did was, if you buy something now in Minnesota for $10, you're paying 4 more cents in sales tax because of what the voters did. This 4 cents bill, it is remarkable what it can amount to in 1 year. I think this past year, 2019, it amounted to over $300 million. The 4 cents. The 4 cents.
Say in an average economy, it's there. The guesstimate is about 250 to 270. So in a good economy, we have more money. When things get a little bit lean, we have less money.
That would be true.
That is a staggering number.
Well, it is, and I can't tell you how many states would kill for something like this. Now, I have a personal knowledge of part of this because I've had the honor of being on the Lessard Sam's Council, which is a group of 8 citizens and 4 legislators that listen to all of the Fish and Wildlife Habitat proposals from people who are looking for a handout. These might be the local DNR, could be the Fish and Wildlife Service, could be Pheasants Forever, could be Ducks Unlimited, on and on. Any Trout Unlimited groups that have a habitat program in there for their existence. And we don't take proposals for sending out a bunch of educational materials or whatever. It has to be habitat. It has to be on the ground. Either fix up a trout stream, restore a wetland, restore prairies, do something with the forest to improve them, take care of invasive species, stuff like that. And this past year we had like $129 million to hand out. Wow.
And I suppose there are people who are going to hear this and say, well, why do we need the money? What do we need it for? Do we really need to protect? We're the land of 10,000 lakes. We've got great deer hunting. We've got the boundary waters. We've got lakes, trout streams, pheasant hunting. Do we really need to do anything more?
Well,
I think the answer is yes.
Well, of course, the answer is yes. The other thing is, if you want to keep those things, we better work on it. But the other truth is, 90+% of all the native prairies in Minnesota are gone. They've been gone for years, plowed up. And so a few people are struggling to keep what we have left. We've drained, again, 90% of our wetlands. If you want some ducks, I mean, what are you going to do? Go to the carnival, see if you can win some or something? I mean, so we have trout streams that, through agriculture and excessive rainfall, etc., get torn up, and the trout habitat is washed away, etc. So is that what you want to fish the rest of your life? No, we can fix these things, and so that's what that's all about. The other thing, Bill, as you well know, Minnesotans are avid outdoor people, and they have a special place in their heart for taking care of the outdoors. Things that they enjoy, or things that their family enjoys, or things that they know their friends enjoy. So that's great. We're we're known for that, and God bless all of us for that.
You know, when I think about the water portion of this, think about the delta at the end of the Mississippi River in New Orleans. That's soil that has come from us. Arguably, some of that used to be Minnesota. Erosion, it washes away. On the other side of things, if you go north, Lake Winnipeg, well, guess what? Lake Winnipeg now is one of the most threatened lakes on the entire planet Earth.
And a source of a lot of walleyes, yeah.
The majority of the walleyes that people in Minnesota eat at restaurants come from Lake Winnipeg. That lake has a delta coming out of the Red River running north, again, caused by soil that we're not keeping here in our state, and the Dakotas too, you know, but the point is we have altered the landscape over the last 150 years, and we can't take it back to Minnesota will never look like it did 200 years ago, but I think we have to make an effort to at least protect and rehabilitate what we can, right?
Yeah, the issue is so big, Bill, that this the millions of dollars I just mentioned it's a good thing, but it's a drop in a bucket on what we could do. But you know, you're making a little bit of progress, as you said, and you also answered the question: do we need to do much? Because you just named the Minnesota River and the Mississippi River as carrying huge loads of siltation and chemicals, farm chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. And you mentioned the Red River of the North, thanks to North Dakota and Minnesota, dumping again a bunch of poisonous materials into Lake Winnipeg. So, yeah, we have a lot to do yet.
You know, I remember us talking when you were working on the special for Minnesota Bound. How do we make the suburban house mother care about this? And I'm being general when I say that, right? I'm not picking on house moms, but we wanted the average person. We wanted to impact them and touch them, even if this didn't directly relate to them. Maybe they don't camp, maybe they don't fish, but why should they care? And it's part of I think part of the answer is it's our legacy. It's who we are, and it's what our state is. And I think we have an obligation.
Yeah. That argument might fall a little short to the Burnsville housewife that's got other concerns. But one concern I know she would have, as we all would have, is what is my drinking water like that I'm feeding my family? And, you know, Pheasants Forever and other groups, writers like myself and yourself, we preached about, hey, we need more grasslands for pheasants. We got to have more grasslands for pheasants. And some people who don't care about pheasants, don't care about hunting pheasants, say, oh, these people, they just want more feathered targets to shoot. It was only after the news started coming out that, hey, the water in many places in southern Minnesota is ill fit to drink, swim in, fish in, whatever, and it's because we've got poison coming off the farmland, and we need to stop it by creating grasslands. And suddenly everybody's interested in grasslands. And that's maybe what the message should have been from the beginning, not just pheasants, but you and I both know if we increase the grassland, we're going to clean up the water, but here's a nice thing. We're also going to produce some pheasants.
You know, you look at Des Moines, Iowa, right?
Oh, yes.
They've had to develop these water treatment plants, and I think they've connected the phosphorus in the water source to agriculture, right?
Nitrates.
And I mean, we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people impacted by these things. And to a point, we're dealing with the same stuff, but going back to the amendment, I think people said, this is something we can do in perpetuity, right? The Constitution was changed in 2008, but this goes forever now. Every year, this money will be collected and distributed. So, as you said,
well, Bill,
there are a lot of other states just chomping to have what we have.
Yeah, it actually has a sunset at 25 years. So it's now 10 years old. And so it means there's 15 more years of collecting this money, the sales tax for these purposes, unless the voters vote to keep it going, which I'm guessing, I may not be around to worry about it, but I'm guessing the voters will. But get this, in the last 10 years, I think it was, I'm trying to find the figure here. It's amazing. In the last 10 years, the legacy amendment, that's just the fish and wildlife part of it, has been $850 million.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, there's not a state in the union that can even match that and what they spent on fish and wildlife habitat. I mean, this is part of the miracle. This is part of the greatest gift that we've given ourselves. And so, like you said, I can't imagine that this is going to end, although it's the legislature wrote that into the bill that in 25 years it would end, unless the voters, of course, want to keep it going again.
So what happens then to the constitutional amendment? Would it be changed or rescinded? What happens then?
Well, I think the constitutional amendment required that this money be spent on fish and wildlife habitat and other things. But if there's no money, then it's almost mute.
Got it.
But now I'm not a lawyer or a legislator. Actually, I'm kind of proud of that. But I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to be around to worry about it. You can worry about it, Bill.
The point is, at 25 years, people will either revote to keep this thing going, or they will pass on it, and then we move on to a new project.
Well, they don't even have to revoke it. It automatically ends in 25 years unless the voters have the option to keep it going. So that's what will happen 15 years from now. In the meantime, the money's still flowing, and there's no end to the projects. I can't tell you, as a trout fisherman myself, like you are, to see some of the before and after pictures of trout stream work in the southeast and northeast part of the state, done by Trout Unlimited, other volunteers, the Lake Superior Steelhead Association, etc. I can't tell you how about going out to Lac-qui-Parle County and other places in western Minnesota and seeing the basin of a wetland that was growing nothing because it was too wet to plant and too dry to raise ducks in, have it restored into a living marsh. It's heartwarming. Like I said, we got a lot to do, but we're making some progress. That's more than what you could have said 10 years ago.
Well, I was going to ask, and I'm not being facetious by asking this, but is it having an impact?
I would say it is, in small ways, in various counties where they've pieced together pieces of, say, wetlands and grasslands. Yes, it's had an impact. You're not going to go out in your backyard and see the sky full of birds because of it, but it will have an impact. But I think it's hard for us to realize, because this change in the Minnesota landscape, particularly the southern half of the state, has been a 100-year process. So it's hard for us to really see just the extent of the change of how much has been drained and how much drainage tile and drainage ditches are in the state now that were never there, and how many, and so I don't think we really know or can't get our heads around just how extreme the changes have been in the Minnesota landscape. And so, in a puny way, we're trying to restore some of that. So it's better than nothing, Bill.
You talk about the trout streams in the driftless region. The glaciers that created the Great Lakes kind of came down Superior and came towards what is now the Twin Cities and sort of hit the brakes at about Red Wing. The glaciers ended there. So that part of Minnesota never got flattened out. So it's still bluffs with the trout streams. It's what they call the driftless region. And I might have my numbers wrong here, but it's like 2,500 miles worth of trout water. And much of that has been degraded over the past century. And so we talk about rehabbing, I don't know, realistically, 20 miles, 15 miles of trout water a year. And so, yes, it is a drop in the bucket, but you know what? We are rehabbing miles worth of water. And if you get out and walk, well, now that's some distance, right? So,
yes.
So we are making improvement. It's just on the grand scale, it's hard to understand, but in small doses, if you live in a town where the marsh out behind town has been brought back to life, that's a big deal. That's a big win.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that now because of the fund. You mentioned early on about a lot of folks, or I did, or you did, they're unaware of the Legacy Amendment. And I just found a statewide survey that was done in 2016. This is almost sad. More than 90% of the Minnesotans surveyed could not name any of the funds supported by their sales tax, which, I guess maybe they had other things to worry about. They're raising kids and they got bills to pay, et cetera. And the 4 cents on their increase in their sales tax on a $10 purchase meant nothing. And so life goes on, and they say, well, take care of it. So we are. The other thing, when it first came out, Bill, there was a lot of suspicion by sportsmen's clubs, especially, who said, oh, this is just another government deal. They want more of our tax money, and they're going to spend it on welfare and schools and, bottomless pits, et cetera, et cetera. And it'll never be used for what they said it's going to be. And of course, the constitutional amendment that you mentioned earlier guaranteed that the legislature could not divert it. They cannot divert it. But here's what listeners ought to keep in mind. The legislature may not divert it, but they used to spend a lot of our income tax money on, say, state DNR fish management programs. Now, in the last 10 years, they've spent nothing on fish management programs because they assumed that our fishing license money, the Dingell-Johnson money, and this Legacy Amendment will take care of the fishing problems in this state. So that's what lawmakers do that they shouldn't be doing. They're not supposed to do that either, but they get away with it.
A little bit of a shell game, right? Money's not under this shell. Don't worry, it's over there now.
Well, it is. It's not the first time it's happened, but at least we have the constitutional amendment that says the legislature, you can change the recommendations, but you can't change them from restoring a wetland to filling potholes. So that we have that going for us.
Well, without sounding too thick here, this week's episode is called The Greatest Gift of which you say to ourselves, but you played a big role in that. You fought long and hard, as did your good friend Gary Leaf, who was very outspoken and put in more than a couple of hours on this deal. And when we use the word legacy, you guys helped create it for our state.
Well, thank you. It certainly wasn't just a few of us there. You know, what amazed me is the arts people, they were getting a little bit of it. And so they stepped up and contacted their legislators. Sportsmen did, of course, hunters and anglers. And of course, clean water speaks for itself, and everybody can associate with parks and trails. And so there's quite a, you know, when you add it all up, that's a heck of a high percentage of Minnesotans involved. And it was especially fun for me because in about a 3-day deal, I got to fly around Minnesota with Bud Grant of all people and Bob Lassard, and talk about two guys to fly around with. And we would have press conferences in Moorhead and Mankato and Duluth and St. Cloud, etc. And of course, with Bud Grant's in town, the media shows up, and we got to pitch for this legacy amendment. Now, a lot of people, get this, the Star Tribune was opposed to it. The paper I work for, editorially, they opposed it. I go, are you kidding me? But anyway, everybody, they didn't like these kind of things. Where you dedicate money to one thing. They want to have it dedicated to anything that comes along, I guess. And so consequently, the Ducks don't have any lobbyists. And so, so when it comes to handing out the money, guess who gets the littlest amount? And anyway, they lost. Minnesotans voted for it overwhelmingly. Over 60% of the voters approved it. But a lot of people didn't think it was going to pass. I had no doubt it was going to pass, because you and I have hung around Minnesota and hung around with Minnesota outdoor people. You know their passion. And this was a chance. If they understood it correctly, there was no way they were going to vote no.
Well, and if you think back, remember the duck hunters who went to the state capitol?
Yes.
Right? That was a show of force.
Yes.
I mean, that plaza was covered in people and signs demanding the state do something.
Yep. Deer hunters did the same thing back in the 70s. So
this is the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. We are talking about this week's episode of the television show, an episode you wrote, Ron, on our greatest gifts to ourselves as Minnesotans, and that is the Outdoor Legacy Amendment and the money raised through a sales tax, self-imposed, that we all voted for, that raises money for clean water and habitat and natural resources here in the state. I'd be amiss if I didn't mention our partners who help make this podcast happen every week. Of course, our good friends at Star Bank and Connecticut and Ice Castles, and the good folks at Rapala and Hewitt Docks. We really appreciate your support. And I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the next week here. We're all hunkered down at home. I suppose I need to get through my tackle boxes too.
Well, you have more tackle than I do, I suspect. And so I think you have a lot of rearranging you could do. And count your rods. How many fishing rods have you got? Don't tell me, because I might have more. But you know what I mean?
I will tell you a funny story. I had our good friends from Star Bank in the boat a year ago. We had Wally and Harry, and we were up in Canada, and the wind was blowing. And we were on this spot, snapping walleyes, very near a pile of rocks on a big part of Lake of the Woods. And I chuckled a little bit, and I said, 1 year ago, and it was 1 year to the day, I was in that very spot and put my rod down to net a fish for somebody, and kind of looked forward to see my rod slide over the front of the boat. That is the only rod I have ever lost in my lifetime. that I can think of. And it was only like 7 feet of water, crystal clear. Couldn't find it. Couldn't see a thing.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to tell me you found it the next year.
No, but I'm convinced I'm going to go back up there with goggles someday. I've got it marked, and I'm going to go and find that darn rod. I may be in tough shape, but it'd be fun to have back. You know,
I've never lost one.
I was going to say, when you have 7 and 9-year-old boys, you tend to get really good at fishing rods out of lakes.
Yeah. I've never lost a rod that way. I've stepped on them on the boat. Did a couple, I think, in a door or two. Busted them, but I've caught several rods of people who have lost what, like you lost. Apparently, I mean, the whole rod and reel, line, reel, even the lure still there, not in any good shape. Been there for years, but it happens. It happens, Billy.
Didn't you recently get a bait caster? Was that maybe last summer?
Yes, I did. I did. Great. Yeah. Yeah, I got one. A guy did me a favor on that lake. And so then I went out fishing by myself, and I'm casting, and I suddenly feel what I think is a bass initially, but no, it's not bass, but it's something's on the end of the line. I pull it in, it's a rod and reel, and hadn't been in the water too long. And so I kind of slished it off a little bit. I said, what am I going to do with this? I go, I know what I'm going to do with this. So I went up to the guy's dock, with the guy that helped me out, and he went home, but I just laid it there and left. And it was sort of like a silent present for him. He may have thrown it in the trash. I don't know.
What bird pulled this out?
Oh, yeah, gosh. Right. Well, exactly.
Well, hunker down. We're going to be doing these podcasts by headset here for a couple of weeks. I know it sounds a little bit different to folks today. We're not in the same room. We're practicing our social distancing, and we're good with that for now. It's the right thing to do, so we're going to do it, but we'll continue to share stories. Ron, sure do appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Always fun to talk about our greatest gift, Bill. Good night.
Good night. Next week, we'll be back with another podcast, Minnesota Bound, the stories behind the stories. In the meantime, I hope you stay healthy. I'm Bill Sherk, the man about the woods. See ya.